This is episode 265 of the Real Me In, a movie podcast. On this week's episode, Chase and Joel will take a look at Ms. Bala, the American remake of a 2011 film of the same name. And of course, we'll have some movie news and some movie trailers to talk about, as well as the up-to-date top 10 little extra thing that we're doing. It's going to be a lot of fun. All that and more on today's Real Me In. What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Real Me In, a movie podcast. I am Chase Lee, one of your co-hosts over here, one of your navigators for this journey of a podcast I'm about to take you on. But of course, I'm not alone. We'll get to him in just a second. But before we begin this episode, if you are new to the show, this is a movie podcast. What we typically do is we'll go over some news, trailers, and we'll have reviews for you guys of current movies, older movies. That's just the way we like to roll. We like to surprise you guys, but that is what we like to do. If you guys could share this episode around, comment, like, favorite, all that stuff for Real Me In, a movie podcast, we would really, really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. And if you're returning listeners, welcome back as usual. This episode, 265, we're going to be doing Ms. Bala. And then, of course, we're going to give you guys our 2015 top 10 list to kind of continue that trend at the start of every month. So, so that is this week's episode. I cannot wait to tell you guys what I got for the show. Does it sound any better? Before I get to all that, the co-host over there, good old Joseph Copling. That is his new name now. Joel, how are we doing this week? It's Super Bowl Sunday here in the States, and I know that you're just cackling on the inside because you're going to know that 2 weeks from now I'm going to have a headache trying to put all together the trailers. But that's just neither here nor there. So how are you doing today, sir?
Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
It's gonna be a pretty intense process. Of course, we're to kind of build on what you just hinted at. We are not having an episode next week. Chase is going to be out of town, so we're coming back the week after. But yeah, that's going to be fun for you. It's going to be fun for me too, because I'll have to do 2 weeks of notes in terms like news items, stuff we have to talk about. And considering there was so much this week that happened, it's going to be pretty intense. But as for me, I should say, it's been pretty uneventful this week. I've rewatched the movie Hancock. That was a pretty significant 180 I made. I didn't like it when I saw it in 2008, excuse me, but I love it now. It's pretty terrific movie. Other than that, just kind of working a lot, watching a lot of movies, and kind of catching up on some stuff that I had missed in theaters and all that. So yeah, it's been going pretty well. Yeah. How about you? Tell people about the new thing you got.
Yeah, so if you guys can kind of hear it, I'm actually really curious on how it sounds on you guys' end, because you guys are the ones that have to listen to it. But I took a picture and I showed it to Joel, and I actually have a podcast arm now, one of those little nets you put at the end of it, and then a new blue Yeti microphone. This is the next step up. Joel has my first generation blue microphone. I still have my old one in the back. I actually might give that one to Joel so he can upgrade. And then, of course, this is the third one that I have gotten along this journey. So I hope it sounds better. I know for me personally, I can't tell you how easier it is to just have the microphone dangle in your face and I can wave my arms around, do whatever I need to on the computer. It's such a breath of fresh air, because I don't know if you guys knew what my setup was. I'd have the laptop in front of me, and then I would have a box with the microphone on top of that box, and basically I'd have to just lean into it. And so, and Joel knows what that setup looks like. It's very, very janky, as the kids would say. Like, what is this? They would be like, "Why are you like working at as if you have a budget of $5?" Well, I do have a budget of $5. Except for this case, I went ahead and just charged my Best Buy credit card because they had a good deal for it. So if you guys are looking for, podcast arms, the net, and this microphone, this whole thing came as a set for like $200. And I'm doing like monthly payments on it, and it's actually not that bad. So I'm excited to use this new microphone for you guys, and hopefully it sounds a lot better. And when I meet up with Joel here in a few weeks, I'm going to go ahead and give him the black one, so he has better quality than he does now. So we'll just keep advancing. And one of these days, whenever I get the money for it, you can bet your butt that I'm going to get Joel one of these podcast arms and microphones. He's going to have a legit setup, and his parents are going to be like, oh, so this is actually like a serious hobby now. And they're like, okay, and they'll just walk around. I kid. Joel's parents are kind of like my parents in a way, where like they're very aware of what we do, but they don't roll their eyes, but they're just like, oh, that's cute. Like, as if we're going to drop it in like a year or so. It's like, no, this has been going on for a while, so we're going to continue to do it. So yeah, new microphone for you guys. How does it sound? And as far as what I've been watching this week, just to let you guys know what my watching habits are, saw Ms. Bala on Wednesday, and on Thursday actually got to see Alita Battle Angel. Now, I will give you guys kind of like a brief preview of what I thought about the movie at the end of this episode, to just to kind of give you a little appetizer for 2 weeks before we talk about it on the next episode. So I'll let you know about that. And then this coming week, I got The Prodigy. I'm seeing High Flying Bird from Netflix probably tomorrow at some point. So just a lot of screenings going on. And like I always keep telling you guys, whatever I don't review on the show for you guys, I will have mini reviews of every single thing I do this year. That way you guys can be fully aware of what's out. So, yeah, that's been kind of my week. As far as like television, since we finished Game of Thrones last week, it's been kind of high and dry. So we've just been kind of watching like Eastbound and Down on HBO, Future Man on Hulu, and then we started this show on Netflix. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's called You, and this one stars Penn Badgley, I believe that's how you pronounce it, and he kind of like stalks this girl around, gets her to fall in love with him. It's some creepy stuff, and people are talking about it. It's popular, but I'm 4 episodes deep into it, and I can't really figure out like why I'm supposed to like it. I mean, this guy is a creeper. I mean, he is straight up sociopathic, and I'm just like, maybe it's like when people try to ask me why I like Dexter a lot. I mean, but he kind of has a purpose with his thing, but I can understand why people would be kind of flabbergasted at kind of liking someone that demented. And this one doesn't really have that quality to it. He just kind of stalks this girl and like will do anything and everything to get her. And so it's really creepy. But it's interesting, maybe from a psychological standpoint. So that is what I've been watching on TV wise.
In terms of TV, I do watch some.
No, you don't. Would you stop lying to the people and just say that you just purely watch movies? You don't know what TV shows are, and that's it.
I watched the Backyardigans. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so with my parents, I don't know why I said the Backyardigans. I think it was because at work I put up like this little 30-minute movie that they had on the shelf in our family section, and that was the thing that I immediately thought of. I don't know why I didn't think of the other things that I put on the family section. Okay, I'm just gonna stop talking about the Backyardigans.
At least we know what's on your mind.
Right. Weird that went to my brain first. Anyway, no, my parents and I have been watching for a while, and it's in its second to last season, I think. It's Suits on USA Network.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's great. The original premise of it's kind of changed because of 2 characters who have left, who were 2 of the main characters. But originally it was about this guy who he's not a Harvard student, but he's kind of at one point wanted to be, and then he got caught up in a rough crowd, and now he's just he was originally trying to get out of this like pot dealing thing. It's been a while since I've seen the first episode, but anyway, he finds himself accidentally in the lineup to be interviewed for a position at a big law firm that only takes on Harvard graduates, and he has a perfect memory. So he remembers everything that he read in the manual and all of that, like the Harvard manual and the everything about the being a lawyer kind of. And so anyway, the show for a while was about simultaneously him, helping solve cases and all of that. And he does that for a long time, even though he's not a legitimate lawyer and never passed the bar. And also it's about him and the guy who hires him trying to hide the fact that that he was hired on, despite the fact that he's not a lawyer, and he's practicing cases not being a lawyer. But now the thing about Suits is that the love interest of that character, the one with the perfect memory, is Meghan Markle, who's now married to Prince Harry. So they had to make a thing where they'd already set in motion a subplot that would have to make both of those characters leave. And so it's been interesting because these last 2 seasons have been the first ones really with like no official main character like they had. And so they've redirected off onto the other characters, and they found really interesting stories with them. So it's been interesting to watch that happen. And it's a really good show. And it's about to enter its last season. I have a feeling it's because it's sort of an Office situation where you had the main character leave. And so now, they're just kind of they're just wrapping things up kind of for these other characters. And there's also a spinoff coming from one of the managing partners who kind of went off on her own and moved to Chicago and started her own firm, and they're about to start that show this year, so I'm going to be watching that. It's a really good show, and it's USA, so they allow a little bit of vulgarity there.
Oh yeah,
so
I've seen Mr. Robot. They are pushing boundaries like FX does.
Yeah, they do that, and it's one of those shows where now they allow F words as long as the F words are kind of removed from the audio.
Right? Isn't
so
it's still weird?
Yeah, it's really weird, but it kind of ups the adult quality of it, just a little bit, And
I appreciate that, because when we were watching the last year's season of American Horror Story, I've seen previous seasons, and typically what FX does, like if they drop the F word, they'll pay that fine and just move on. But I remember watching that season and the People versus OJ. They're dropping F-bombs left and right. I'm like, is someone paying a fine for this? Like, what's the deal? And so, I don't know, man. It seems like FX doesn't even really care anymore, and that might be because they're about to get swallowed up by Disney. I have no clue, but it's just really fascinating that like USA, FX, and all these other
AMC does it with
Walking Dead. I know that Sci-Fi does it with that show Happy. I've seen a couple episodes of that. It's really violent, and there's language everywhere, and I'm like, how are they getting away with this? I'm still baffled by all that, but
maybe they just dump a bunch of money into part of the budget, and they're like, okay,
fines.
Yeah, this is for the fines that we have to pay to say
the FCC is like super busy every week, because like every single like Monday they're just like, oh my god, like how many F-bombs did FX drop? And like around 100, sir. Oh god, we have to file each one of these.
Yep, there we go.
That's great. So that's interesting that you've been watching Suits, and I've been watching you. I like our movie.
You've been watching me.
Okay, I've been watching Joel.
I got that out of my system.
Right. I'm sure so many jokes and puns have been made off that title, but Joel and I's TV viewing habits couldn't be more radical than our movie watching habits, so I think that's kind of interesting. Now you guys have a little insight. Speaking of movies, Joel, trailers are still a thing, and Joel wouldn't know because he doesn't watch them, but there are 5 trailers that dropped this week, and I'm going to go over them with you. And one of them, I'm so excited to just explain to Joel, to have Joel have an aneurysm live on the air. And I can't wait.
I know what it is.
He knows what it is, but I just can't wait for him to like actually have a seizure, and then like I'm gonna have to like call his mom. It's gonna be so great. All right, so the first one is a documentary called Apollo 11, and that's exactly what it is. It showcases the mission of Apollo 11 with Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and you're probably wondering like what's what's different about this one? You know, we've seen a lot of space documentaries before, and that's very true. But this was also shot in, 1969 and even years prior to that, with the buildup and everything. There wasn't, everything was shot in black and white. So what's really great about this trailer is that they colorized every single frame, and it looks stunning. It's the type of, footage that you sit back and go, I've seen this before, but for some weird reason, when they add color to it, it just pops even more, and it just looks so cool to see Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, I guess that would be 50 years ago, doing this mission and seeing the colorized version of that footage. It is absolutely breathtaking, and I cannot wait to see this documentary. I think I don't see a date. Well,
I know it just showed at Sundance.
Okay, so it just showed at Sundance.
Raves, by the way. Everybody loved this.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but praise, and so I can't wait to see it. I know Joel and we're nerdy like that. We like our space stuff, so I'm sure he was just as excited. And just watch the trailer, because you're just like, oh, it's another space documentary. Just the color added to the film enhances it to such a degree that it's almost like you're watching it again for the first time. Absolutely breathtaking. So that is the first trailer that dropped. Really nothing more to that. The next one is from A24 and DirecTV, and believe it or not, it is not the only DirecTV trailer to drop this week. This one's called The Hole in the Ground, and this one is about a mother and her son, and they kind of live around a wooded area, and so her son goes into the woods, he starts hearing things, and then I think he gets lost, and then he gets sucked into this hole into the ground, and the mother thinks he's dead. And so he comes back, and he's like, hello, mother. The kind of like Omen child almost, where you're just like...
Kind of off-kilter, a little off-kilter.
Yeah, right. And so the mother's like, son, is that you? And then she puts herself into denial, and she's like, yeah, this is my son. But then other people are just like, fam, that's not your son. And so, he gives like the death stares, and he talks very robotically as if he's being possessed by something. And we don't really know what the possession is. That's what's the kind of the whole mystery about the trailer. But I mean, it looks fine. The thing is with A24 and DirecTV, I've seen a few of them now, and I still love A24. You guys know that. Joel does too. But there's something about when DirecTV gets involved with it, it just, the quality goes straight down where, it literally looks like it's made for TV. And I guess that's okay considering the company behind it. But if you're trying to release this stuff in theaters, I just don't see a point for it, because it doesn't scream cinematic, like rich imagery. And so the trailer itself, on a like story and mystery level and the progression of suspense, yeah, I'll buy into it. But I just think the overall look to it, and this isn't the only one this week that has this problem, the overall look to it just doesn't really scream cinematic. So that would be my only issue. But in terms of a trailer that's actually edited together, I thought it did a decent job. The next one is, I can't believe they're even making this considering the controversy around the first one, but this one's called A Dog's Journey, and no, it is not the sequel to A Dog's Way Home that just came out 3 weeks ago. It is the sequel to A Dog's Purpose that came out 2 years ago. Now, this one picks up, I guess, where the first one left off. Josh Gad voices a dog. He wants his back scratched by Dennis Quaid. He scratches the back. They travel through time.
What?
They different generations where like the dog spirit gets into other dogs and other generations. You know what? As you can tell, I don't really care. I never saw the first one, but I do remember the controversy around it. Joel, do you remember the video that surfaced of some of the stunt people shoving the dog into like the screaming rapids of water?
Oh yes, yeah,
right.
I remember that now. I knew that there was controversy surrounding treatment of the animals. I had forgotten that there was a video though. Yeah,
right. And so that was the whole like Bubbaloob or whatever of around the first one, and people still saw it, I guess, because now they're making a sequel. So I could care less. I'm not really a fan of like dog movies or animal movies. I watched them as a kid, like Homeward Bound, but that's as far as I'll go. And like Air Bud, I don't know, not for me. But if you like
A Dog's Way Home is in those veins. It's actually from the director of Air Bud. So
okay, I mean, and you know that one, you know, has
way better than A Dog's Purpose. Dog's
Right.
Purpose was a big like yawn fest for me. I wasn't moved. I'm half and half on those, but in the good half is A Dog's Way Home. I think it's because it doesn't have sort of that supernatural twist where
Right.
we're following a dog's consciousness, which, you know, is it
really morbid
actually
when
a
you think
dog's
about it.
consciousness, or is it just a random consciousness? I don't know. Anyway,
It's actually kind of morbid when you think about it. You're just
it
like,
is
oh, so
very-
this dog is just dying and its consciousness is just floating.
Exactly. The first movie opens, and within 2 minutes we have the dog death, and it's like it's only weeks old or something.
Oh,
and,
good Lord.
You know, it starts out with this bummer, and it just moves through different bummery situations until it's reunited with one of the owners it had. It's not even the original owner, considering the original dog dies 2 weeks after it's born. So it was weird. It's not a very good movie.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought up the whole Yawn Fest thing, because this trailer is 3 minutes long, and I had to check the time every 30 seconds because I'm like, is this over yet? I feel like they just showed the whole movie. So I as a trailer fan, whatever, I don't give a crap.
Yeah.
All right, next one. Before we get to the one that Joel is very excited for me to explain to him, the next one is a Vigilante, and it stars Olivia Wilde as a carnival worker, and she has to fight No, I'm just kidding. She is the Vigilante, and she helps victims escape their domestic abusers. And believe it or not, I think her performance in this trailer is phenomenal. I like the editing of the trailer because it starts out with her boxing a bag, and the trailer uses the boxing beats of her fists to kind of propel the energy for the trailer, which I thought was really smart. But, and this is a huge but, this is also from DirecTV, the cinematography looks atrocious. Everything about the movie has this blue tint on it, and it doesn't even look pleasing at all. Then we have shots that are overblown with light, so it's completely overexposed. And I'm like, who approved of this? So as a trailer, pure interest and performance-wise, I actually do want to see it. But for the cinematography, it is embarrassing. And I cannot believe that even though they make these movies to consume on television and, you know, rent from the DirecTV store or whatever, it's just they're becoming lazy about it, and I don't like it. So, you know, I know Joel doesn't want to watch trailers. Maybe he will watch this when he watches the movie, but the trailer on a visual front is atrocious. But I do like Olivia Wilde in the trailer. She looks like she's going to give one of the better performances of her career, so I like that about it. But overall, it's just a kind of meh. Okay, the last one, and I'm going to read it as it is titled on IMDb. Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw. Now, as you guys know, I know Joel doesn't really like to tell you guys because he's actually, how do I say it? He tries to appeal to you guys in a way that's kind of wrong and very deceitful. So here's what Joel does. He comes on air as if he's proud of this, and he says he likes Marvel, he likes Star Wars. It's not true, folks. The only franchise this man has ever liked is the Fast and Furious franchise, and he will sit there and lie to your face. And I'm baffled that Joel would do that to you guys. It's disheartening. Listen, you know, okay, so given the fact that this is his favorite franchise, I just want to make sure I read this properly for Joel, and then I'll let him speak. So, Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw. I'm not going to even read it off IMDb because I just want to explain it to you guys. So Idris Elba is the baddie, in this movie, and he's kind of going around looking for some technology, and then he's injected with some type of weird serum where it makes him superhuman, and people are like, how do we stop him? Oh, let's contact the 2 people from the Fast and Furious franchise to defeat this, and we're going to have one car chase scene in the entire trailer. Okay, so that's basically what it is. It is like a Lethal Weapon, ridiculous, over-the-top action film with superheroes and The Rock slamming into glass windows saying F you behind the glass, and guess what? I cannot wait for it. This looks absolutely bonkers, and I will be there opening day. I will force Joel to choose this as the movie that we're talking about that weekend because I like to do that to him. It is absolutely insane, and it's from the director, I believe, David Leitch. Let me just double check. He's one of the John Wick people. Yes. So David Leitch, and he's one of the John Wick people, and you know, to be honest with you, as much as I liked the trailer quite a bit, I was a little underwhelmed with the action scenes a bit because those guys are very inventive when it comes to choreography, cinematography, and action set pieces, especially hand-to-hand combat. Those guys are a force to be reckoned with. I was a little underwhelmed with some of the action. Some of it definitely fits the Fast and Furious style. There's an armored truck that goes off of a ramp and spins 360 into something else. That's amazing. There's people on wires running down buildings, and then The Rock like jumping on someone as he's in midair. It is absolutely insanity, and I love it to death. I can't wait for us to talk about it, and then of course talk about Fast 9 for next year. It's just I can't wait, and I don't
know what you're talking about. We'll be talking about Dora the Explorer that weekend.
No, we aren't. We're talking about this. So yeah. So that is the trailer. There's not really nothing much to explain. To be honest with you, I do like the edit music choice for the trailer. They use "Why Can't We Be Friends" playing under this ridiculous action. So I do appreciate that because it kind of highlights the absurdity of the movie. So yeah, really great trailer. But to be honest with you, my favorite one was the Apollo 11 trailer because it just, once again, stunning. So Joel, I'll let you speak now. So now that we are live on air, and you told yourself at the beginning of the year you would not lie as your resolution, so would you please finally tell people that Star Wars, Marvel, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff, it doesn't matter to you anymore because Fast and Furious was always your one true love?
You're a dirty, rotten liar. No, this does sound like the kind of crazy insanity that I might enjoy.
Idris Elba is a supervillain with superpowers.
Superpowers in a Fast and the Furious movie.
Yep.
Is really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm certainly most interested in Apollo 11 from the sounds of it, just because that's my thing. And also, it gives me a chance to go into our first bit of news. Sort of. Why is that? Even though it's actually not related at all to this bit of news. It's because of the director, and I've decided to switch around the first 2 bits of news because just this weekend I caught up with a documentary called They Shall Not Grow Old from director Peter Jackson, in which he does to World War I footage what you're talking about with Apollo 11, which is to colorize the footage. Now, it's interesting because for years and years there's been kind of a resistance to colorizing black and white footage ever since I think it was It's a Wonderful Life had this kind of colorized version that played on TVs. I think it was It's a Wonderful Life. There have been a couple of them over the years, but I think that was the most hated one because it looks so awful. However, Peter Jackson did this with his documentary this weekend. It's I'll talk about it later in the year. Let's just say that it's an astonishing technological achievement because what he does is he doesn't just colorize it; he then converts that footage into 3D. And this is not, jump out at you from the screen 3D. This is depth of field 3D, sort of in the way that Life of Pi was, or Hugo, stuff like that, where it's basically just kind of extending the field that you can witness, to where the people in the footage populated both the foreground and the background, whereas usually with archival footage, we're kind of just we're watching very old footage. It doesn't quite seem like there's people in the front of the frame and in the back of the frame like what happens with 3D, and it's absolutely astonishing to look at. Now, they haven't done that with 3D in this, it sounds like, but they have colorized it, and I think that something that They Shall Not Grow Old does is that it puts a specific kind of timely intimacy on it, and by timely I mean it makes it kind of timeless. And so it's going to be interesting to see them do a similar thing with footage of this Apollo 11 flight, and that's why I'm really interested, especially just directly on the heels of something like They Shall Not Grow Old. And so I'm definitely most interested in that. And it also leads us into the first bit of news in a way, because Peter Jackson is going to be following up that World War I documentary with a Beatles documentary. Now, this is significant. So, for a couple of reasons. So, I don't know if you knew this, but kind of one of the holy grails for physical media collectors is the original Let It Be movie that was directed by Michael Lindsay Hogg, which is about to be apparently restored, kind of on the heels of this news is something that we learned. It's going to be restored, and that's amazing, because right now the only way to watch Let It Be, the original Let It Be, is to go to archive.org and search for it, and then watch it through the video platform that they have, because otherwise it's nowhere unless you already own the VHS tape or the Laserdisc. And yes, I just said that. It has never been released on legitimate DVD. There have been bootleg DVDs come out with it, but those are all unavailable anymore. And it's so it's never been legitimately released, which means that there hasn't really been much lengthy footage kind of covering the recording of Let It Be by the Beatles members, Sir Paul McCartney, Sir Ringo Starr, John Lennon, and George Harrison. And then the reason is because those recordings, the footage, kind of shows them at their most contentious. And it shows Paul McCartney to be kind of a jerk to the other people. That's the rumor, at least. I haven't watched the original on like I said, archive.org. But that's going to be remastered and restored for a new version that I guess McCartney's kind of okayed, because he's the one with final refusal on that. Or first refusal, I should say, I think, on that footage. And then Jackson's going to come in and use never released footage of that studio recording and create a new movie that was footage shot in the midst of January of 1969. And I can't wait for this. And he's partnering with Apple on this, by the way, which is a really interesting thing, considering Apple was at Sundance this year to buy a bunch of movies. They've teamed up with A24 to do. They're getting into the movie business basically in a big way, and so this is really exciting to hear that we're going to be able to see footage of this recording that's been so kind of mysterious to a lot of people. People love the album, but it's the footage is not been widely seen by a lot, and it'll be interesting to see that come to light. So, that's the first bit of news. The second bit of news is the fact that of course, Universal kind of screwed the pooch on their Dark Universe. That was going to be the one that they had with all the classic Universal monsters together. It started, or was supposed to start, with The Mummy last 2 years ago now. Awful movie that I hated, and it didn't do very well, and so they scrapped those plans. But they have ported all of those plans over to Blumhouse, which is an interesting housing house for that idea. And they've given the first movie in this official kind of try to Lee Wannell, or Lee Wannell, however you say his name, who just recently directed Upgrade, and he's going to be directing The Invisible Man for them. Now, those who pay close attention to the universe know that previously The Invisible Man was going to be played by Johnny Depp. Now, Depp's kind of gotten into hot water because of allegations regarding his abusive Heard in their marriage, and so now finally he's kind of gotten some what am I trying to say? I just forgot the word. Consequences for that from studios. So, for instance, he was fired from, or he's not moving forward with the next Pirates of the Caribbean, and now the word is that he's not going to be moving forward with this. So it's kind of finally to that point where he's not getting work. It'll be interesting to see where they go. I don't know if Blumhouse is the best house for this particular idea just because they make such small productions. I know that they could afford that, but their strategy has been, kind of controlling budget to the point that they can make movies for a small amount. And I just don't know if their small budgets are the right thing for this. But it is interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how Wannell does with this first movie. The third bit of news is that there's going to be a David Bowie biopic, I should say. This is sort of right off the hot off the heels of stuff like Bohemian Rhapsody and then the upcoming Rocket Man. Those are likely to be both very big hits. So I'm not surprised. So this actually comes doubly with a bit of news I didn't notice in this article at first. There's also a biopic of Celine Dion in the works called The Power of Love. And also, by the way, the David Bowie movie is going to be called Stardust, which is perfect because of the whole Ziggy Stardust thing. And so this is interesting. I'm fascinated by the fact that they're kind of going in this direction with sort of biographizing on screen recent, semi-recent, rock stars, music icons like, Elton John's coming up, and, we already had now Queen and Celine Dion's going to be a target of a movie with Valérie Lemercier, who's a French actress. She's not only going to be starring as Celine Dion, but writing and directing that movie. So it's really interesting that we're doing this. And all right. So whenever I get to the questions that I have, Chase, I'll have two for you, but I want to cover one other bit of news before we get there. But I will have two questions for you. One, what do you think of that news? And two, when do you think we're going to get the biopic about Backstreet Boys? All right, so keep those thoughts in your head, and then I'm going to move on to the last bit of non-casting news, and it comes from the DCEU. A bunch of stuff has happened. So officially, we have news that Ben Affleck is no longer the Batman for the DCEU, and that Matt Reeves is currently on the search for a new replacement. Now, the other thing is that it has been dated for June of 2021, and that it's a noir detective story with a bunch of villains. A rogues gallery has been the phrase that's been used. So that's that bit of news. And the other thing is that James Gunn has officially signed on to direct the second Suicide Squad movie, which, I just wanted to remind Chase that because I've been working up to this pun all week. I just want to remind Chase that in 2016 we got the kind of disastrous movie known as X-Men Origins Suicide Squad, right? So now we have a follow-up called The Suicide Squad. Because, of course, you just add a pretentious "the" in front of something and it makes it a sequel. It's sort of like The Final Destination. I'm just kidding, guys. So, all right. I like the idea of Gunn taking on a movie about a band of misfits. Obviously, he's done well with that before. And, we'll see what happens with the cast from Suicide Squad 2 or The Suicide Squad. We'll see. It's up in the air for me. But the whole idea behind the Batman being a noir detective story is very exciting to me. And I really like that idea because I feel like it has always existed in the movies. It's always existed kind of on the edges of noir. You think of kind of the production design of Burton's two movies had that noir feel, especially in the first one. And, of course, there's various crime drama elements of Christopher Nolan's trilogy, although it never really went into noir territory. This, finally kind of on screen in live action, whereas the animated films have always dealt with this idea that there's a noir element going on, I think is really smart for them to finally capitalize on that. And I can't wait to see how that turns out. So, Chase, remember that extra question and tell me what you think about all of these pieces of news.
Okay, so I guess just to kind of touch upon the Blumhouse thing, believe it or not, even though you guys know I love me some Blumhouse, Joel's actually kind of correct. I like the style that they always do with their movies. It's kind of like this low budget, grungy type of feel for most of their movies. I just don't see that with The Invisible Man. I could be wrong once I actually see it in motion. But for right now, in terms of concept and in terms of who's developing it, I just don't see the match quite there. Because these aren't films that deal with the scares. They deal with more the drama and the humanity with these characters. So I like Blumhouse. I know he's dipped into like Oscar-winning movies and stuff, and I don't see the fit. But I do like Wannell. He is fantastic. He's always been on my radar ever since I saw him in Saw, and the fact that he wrote the first three, and then of course with Upgrade, and he's been a part of the Insidious franchise for a long time. I just love the guy's vision when it comes to horror, and so I actually kind of agree with Joel. I don't think that Blumhouse is the right fit necessarily, but we'll have to see it and know for ourselves. The Peter Jackson thing is great. I've heard nothing but great things about the war documentary that he did, and that gets me excited for him to do a one on the Beatles. The David Bowie one. Well, I'll do the DCEU first, and then I'll go back to that one since you asked me those questions. So the DCEU, make Batman a neo-noir story. They've been doing detective stories since the birth of DC. Do you know what DC stands for? Detective Comics. It's always been in their DNA to do stuff like that, so why not? And I think having Matt Reeves at the helm is perfect. I mean, if he could... I know a lot of people don't really care for this movie, but I kind of thought that Let Me In, the American remake of Let the Right One In, I thought that visually kind of had like a neo-noir type of feel for it. Given the fact that it was a vampire story, it's not necessarily 100% neo-noir, but it kind of had that really kind of harsh, shadowy look to it, really rich in detail, even though a lot of it's not really color. I think that movie's probably the best representation of what we're going to probably get, but it's just going to be amplified because it's Batman. I like that news. Obvious, it's DC Comics people. The James Gunn thing, so great. I'm so glad that Warner Brothers is the first one. Well, actually, I guess Sony is the first one to do the FU to Disney because, they got Brightburn coming out, and I know he didn't write it, but his brothers did, and he produced it. So it's basically like a Gunn family picture. And then, of course, Warner Brothers is giving the good old FU to Disney, and they're making him helm basically their Guardians of the Galaxy. So why not? That's like the biggest FU of all time. So I think it's perfect. I want to see what he does with, those characters, especially if we're going to get the same people coming back. So yeah, I did that quite a bit, and then let's see, Batman. Okay, so that was it for those. Okay, so to the David Bowie thing, as far as like what I think about it, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Music's not really my thing because I hate music, and I'm just kidding. I don't listen to a lot of music, that predates my birth date year, which is 1990. I listen to 80s rock every now and then. I love me some like Queen. I love thrash metal from the 80s and 70s. I have a very particular taste when it comes to music, but I've listened to a couple of Bowie's songs, and I can't deny that he is not talented, and he's such an icon that when he passed, I knew that they were going to do a biopic. So am I excited for it? Sure, why not? It's the same thing with Rocket Man. I really had never listened to any of oh God, Joel, I'm blanking. Elton John, sorry. I've only listened to Rocket Man and maybe another song in passing, or maybe I've listened to a lot more than I thought I have, and I just don't know the names of the songs, but I'm excited to see that because I don't know much about him. So that's great to know that type of story. It's the same thing with Bowie. I don't know much about him or his music, but I want to see a movie about him, and he's such an icon, so why not? And then your two questions were, when are we getting this movie, and when we're getting the Backstreet Boys one? So I think they're going to move pretty fast with the Bowie one, and I wouldn't be surprised if we got it by November of next year to kind of capitalize on that Bohemian Rhapsody release date. I can see that. Or early 2021. But I do think it will come soon, most likely next year. Okay. So I do a lot of joking on this show. I do a lot of sarcasm. I am 100% real when I say this. Ever since I was a kid, and even when Joel was a kid, we're the same age, like we grew up in the same time frame. I have always wanted, both of these actually, I've always wanted a Backstreet Boys one and an NSYNC one. That I've been wanting that since I was a kid, and when we're getting that is an interesting question. Because if you would have asked me before 2013, I would have told you never, because they're irrelevant. Once they made their ending appearance at This Is the End, I knew right then and there that these guys were trying to do comeback tours and stuff, and I was like, okay, now they're back in the limelight. I think this is probably going to work out.
They just had a new album release in the last week too.
Right. So like they're getting back into the limelight, and so a biopic about them is just inevitable. Like, we're going to get it at some point. Now, are we going to get it soon? I don't think so, only because they're kind of doing their comeback stuff right now. We might get one within 5 years, maybe, to let the kind of comeback die down and then just kind of like cap it all off with a movie. I think that would probably be best. But yeah, ever since I was a kid, I still listen to their music to this day. I would love to see a Backstreet Boys biopic and even an NSYNC one, especially given the fact that, Timberlake was a part of that, and now he's exploded into what he is now. I just think they're interesting stories, and they weren't the first ones, but they were definitely like the godfathers of boy bands in the 90s. That is for dang sure. So yeah, I want to see it, but probably within 5 years, I would probably guess.
Okay, yeah. See, that's what I'm thinking, because I feel like collectively we're moving down the timeline,
right?
Of being able to say that Backstreet Boys at some point are gonna do that, and it's just we'll have a movie about it, and it'll be interesting to see who then is kind of enough of a star to play each of the members. it'll be really interesting.
So
all right.
Joel, I have to ask you like real quick because like since we were born in the same time frame, has there been a biopic about any particular music group beside? Well, okay, I'll say that until later. Was there any other musical group from the '90s that were huge that has been made with the movie yet? I can't really think of any.
In terms of big screen, I can't really think of one. I know that they've made a bunch for like the small screen on Lifetime and stuff, but
well, because the only one I
particularly-
can think of, because I know they didn't start in the '90s, but they kind of bled into the '90s with their problems and of course their tail end of their careers. But Straight Outta Compton is probably the most, I guess, notable one right now.
Yeah, that's probably the most recent, chronologically speaking, the most recent. Until they get to this Celine Dion thing, which is
Oh, right.
yeah, I think that her peak was a little later than that. But yeah, so that'll be. I think honestly, the Power of Love is going to be the one that's the most recent. I mean, unless you define biopic kind of vaguely, and then it's 8 Mile because it's kind of
right
about Eminem right at the peak of his career, and it's about just a few years before that. Although it isn't exactly his story. He wasn't a factory worker,
right. yeah.
So that wasn't his job before that because he broke into it in late teenhood. But yeah, so that might be the one. But and it's a great movie too. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we finally get around to that because I don't know. I mean, I guess we haven't really ever had a proper Beatles biopic, have we?
I don't think so.
Yeah, at
We've
some
had
point
several
we'll probably get
documentaries, but we've never had like an authentic biopic yet.
Yeah, and we've had like stories inspired by them, and they've been in little concert movies as themselves, kind of with not concert movies, but music-based movies like A Hard Day's Night and Help. But we've never really had any sort of biopic that I can think of, and it's probably because of John Lennon's fate. That's what I'm thinking, because that would put a pall over everything else. But we haven't had that, so it'll be interesting to see one if we ever get that, and also if we ever get to the point of biographizing on screen any sort of 90s group, because of the fact that generally speaking, when it comes to pop music, the 90s is, it was big, but it's kind of considered a whiff in terms of, there was a lot of interesting movements elsewhere. Like we'll probably get, a Nirvana biopic at some point that ends with, of course, Kurt Cobain's suicide. But we never really have got that before. So I feel like if we don't get like a Backstreet Boys first, then we'll get something like a Nirvana or something to do with like, oh gosh, what? Like, man, I can't even some country star, because country music was huge in the 90s.
Right.
Like Garth Brooks, who is, I think, the second biggest selling artist of all time, even bigger than Michael Jackson, just because of the numbers. So we'll probably get that first. I feel like if we're looking at 90s music and wondering who's going to be in a biopic next, we got to look at the biggest movements, which are country music, and then the advent of the re-advent, I guess, of boy bands. And yeah, I feel like Garth Brooks and Backstreet Boys, maybe, George Strait, although he was more in the 80s, I think. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I know that at some point, I feel like we're going to get a bunch of country music biopics if they're moving into this arena, because of how big that was in the 90s. You just can't ignore that.
I'm surprised with the critical and award success of Walk the Line, there hasn't been more.
Right. Yeah, that's what's interesting to me. It's like I feel like we'd probably get a Walk the Line about Garth Brooks or George Jones or something. I'm not a country music guy.
Trust me, I'm not either.
I'm suddenly making myself sound like super knowledgeable. I listened to a lot as a kid, but as I grew up, I kind of grew away from it.
Like Joel and I we're the a part of the collective few in Texas that do not like country music.
Yeah, it's there's some, obviously. I think that I actually like a lot of older country music than the newer stuff that's kind of bled into pop. But it's really interesting to consider the overwhelming success of somebody like Garth Brooks, and the possibility that there could be a biopic made about him. He has an interesting story, and Vince Gill does too. I think that would be interesting. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because these are, for you and I, we're kind of entering that generation where we're going to be starting to talk about how this isn't that long ago.
Right.
When whereas for artists that were before us, we can say that because we weren't alive for the peaks of a lot of those careers. We can say, oh man, that was a long time ago. But now that we're getting into Celine Dion getting a biography, that's a little too close for comfort in terms of saying that it isn't that long ago.
Joel,
because it isn't.
I'm already not looking forward to our next birthdays, because we will be entering a new decade, and it scares the crap out of me. And we'll have to be listening to all these kids going, I'm listening to this, and like, I remember listening to that 20 years ago.
Right, exactly, man. I'm telling you, as soon as they hit a Jay-Z biopic, I'm done. All right.
We will just retire and just die right there.
We will. Yeah, the person who plays Jay-Z probably hasn't been born yet, but still.
Exactly. That's what's scary about it.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move on from that interesting discussion to the casting news. I'm just going to kind of run through these pretty quickly. There's not much to say about them. The first one is really interesting. It's kind of in the vein of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, although the title of the movie is probably going to give everybody a heart attack, thinking that there's going to be an animated movie about Fruit Loops being made. That is not, in fact, the case. Ted Melfi, who is the director of Hidden Figures, and also St. Vincent, both good movies, is making this with Woody Harrelson, and it's the story of Leonard F. Cubby, a colonel who was in Vietnam and saw a lot of really terrible stuff. Took a bunch of endless tours in there and developed PTSD as a result, and has been institutionalized. And there's a bunch of patients in this institution who are suddenly being threatened by the hospital where they're staying is being sold. Wow, I said sold. I'm like tripping over words, guys, today. Sorry. And there's a bunch of characters in here, and of course Harrelson's going to be the main character. It's sort of in the vein of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, one of the most perfect movies ever made, Best Picture winner, one of the best picture winners ever made. So obviously, sort of that tangential connection. I'm interested to see if they can take on material like that and do something Cuckoo's Nest-ish with it. So it'll be interesting to see that. And I love Harrelson, of course. The next is one that I'm not really familiar with. I am among the few, apparently, who have not seen Candyman, the 1992 film, or its sequel, Farewell to Flesh. But Nia DaCosta is directing a remake of it, sort of a reimagining. It's going to be produced by Jordan Peele, and they have a main actor, and that is Lakeith Stanfield, who, of course, just killed it in Sorry to Bother You. And he had a minor role in Get Out with Peele, and he's going to be taking over the role, I'm pretty sure. Apparently it sounds very similar to the one played by Virginia Madsen, so it's going to be interesting to see them kind of gender flip that role. Again, I'm not familiar with the original movie. It's one that was out of print on DVD for a while, and Scream Factory just recently released Blu-ray kind of remaster. We have one at work. I'm certain that I'll be watching that soon. But in any case, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. It's a very disturbing. It's apparently a very disturbing movie. So yeah. The next one is Angelina Jolie is going to be starring in Taylor Sheridan's next movie. Now, something that we never actually reported on was that Sheridan was originally going to be making this movie called Fast, which starred Chris Pratt as a DEA agent who leads a Black Ops strike team targeting drug dealers who are being protected by the CIA, which is very interesting. But it's stalled. Pratt's no longer involved, and so Sheridan is moving on to this other production called Those Who Wish Me Dead, which is about a 14-year-old boy who witnesses a brutal murder and enters a federal protection program that involves teaching him survival skills. And along the way, he encounters a couple of killers, and there's a few people kind of standing in the way between them and protecting the kid, including a woman who could be played by Jolie. It's unclear who she's playing, but it's based on a novel that I've heard is really good, and it's going to be Sheridan's second directorial effort after Wind River. On the basis of Wind River, I was kind of marginal on. I guess I'm kind of hesitant just because I don't know. I don't know how skilled he is as a director versus how skilled he is as a screenwriter, which has been showed by movies like Hell or High Water and Sicario. It'll be interesting to see how this turns out. It could very well be that the sophomore the sophomore effort is better than his first one. We'll find out. Next is a couple of actors who have joined an Aaron Sorkin project, which is Trial of the Chicago 7, which is based on a 1969 trial involving the 1968 Democratic National Convention and the countercultural protests. It's already starred, added actors like Eddie Redmayne and Sacha Baron Cohen. And now we have two others, Seth Rogen and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, which makes this a 50-50 reunion. And also a night before reunion. I never saw that, but 50-50 is the more, obviously, the more popular one. Apparently, it's going to be, it's also going to have Michael Keaton, potentially, but we haven't heard that officially yet. So, really excited for that. It's interesting material. Certainly, that convention was insane. The next one is that Dakota Johnson, Jason Segel, and Casey Affleck, interestingly, still getting work, are all going to be coming together for a drama called The Friend, which comes from director Gabriella Cowperthwaite, she previously directed Megan Levy, the kind of marginal movie with Kate Mara about the dog, and it's a war dog kind of thing, an actual dog. Anyway, this movie tells the story of Nicole and Matthew Teague, who, after learning Nicole has 6 months to live, receive some unexpected support from their friend who moves into their home and puts his entire life on hold. That's a pretty interesting premise. I like that. I like that premise a lot. It'll be interesting to see these actors together. And then the last bit is that Dune has added like 17 new actors. This thing has got an insane cast, and it just added actors Javier Bardem and Oscar Isaac, which is a really interesting pairing. And also Zendaya, who, if people don't immediately know her name, had a big 2017 being Mary Jane in Spider-Man Homecoming, and also was in The Greatest Showman as I don't remember her name, but she was in The Greatest Showman. And yeah, so all really good actors, have definitely proven themselves in the past. It'll be interesting to see how this turns out. I'm not familiar with Dune. I haven't read the books, all the like 22 books or something that they wrote about this material. I know it's very, very dense and very complex and hard to adapt. David Lynch tried it, and he made a movie with Kyle MacLachlan, Patrick Stewart, a bunch of other people. Laura Dern, I think, was in it. But it apparently wasn't a very good movie. It's one of the kind of the blights on his his filmography, at least as far as I know. And then there was a TV version with William Hurt, I think, that I think a TV movie version or something that was apparently just wildly inaccurate to the source material and really bad. So I don't know. We'll see. And yeah, I'm glad that Denis Villeneuve's taken that on, because if anybody can do it, it's him. All right, a bunch of casting news to sift through. Chase, what are your thoughts on all of it?
Yeah, I'm actually I'm cool and interested in all of them. To just go down really quick, the Fruit Loops movie sounds like the Carnage prequel. Since we already saw Woody Harrelson tackle that last year, but no, he's great, and kind of riding off of that, who was it? Columbia. They put the new poster up for Zombieland, and he was in it. And it's just like, the guy can just do anything, and I'm down for it. Lakeith Stanfield in Candyman is a great pick. Now, I saw Candyman a long time ago when my friends and I in high school, we would watch all these R-rated films, and sorry, Mom and Dad, I watched all those when I was a kid. I shouldn't have, because I wasn't supposed to, but some of my friends' parents, I will not rat them out, but some of them did not care what we watched. And I remember watching Candyman with Tony Todd, and I love that man's voice. He can make anything sound eerie, and he's in that movie. And so kind of remaking with the Peel team and Stanfield, that's awesome. Angelina Jolie, sure. I haven't really been blown away by her in a long time in anything acting-wise, so we'll see. Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Seth Rogen teaming up for a 50-50 reunion. Sign me up, especially when you have Sorkin involved. Rogen's already worked with Sorkin before with Steve Jobs. So, yeah, great picks. And then the Dune movie, just give that to me now. I love me some David Lynch, but that I am embarrassed to say that is one of the few I have not seen from him. And so I don't really know what the movies look like. I don't even know what the movie's even about, or even the source material. That's how far removed I am from it. But given Joel's description of like 1,000 books for this story, I will definitely not touch it now. And that's just, guys, I don't have time to read. That's probably why my English and my grammar is just awful. So, yeah, all the cast in this Dune movie so far, great choices, especially when you have Oscar Isaac as Timothée Chalamet's dad in the movie. That's great casting. They look pretty similar. And then, you're just adding talent on talent on talent, so I'm all down for it. And then the last one with The Friend, it's really funny that you brought up, Aaron Sorkin, and now with, like, Jason Segel and stuff, because, like, when we get to our top films of 2015, I have a lot of those movies from those people. And so it's cool that they're making a comeback. So with Jason Segel, I'm glad that he's finally doing something. I've always been a fan of him ever since I saw him on Freaks and Geeks way back in the day. But once I saw Forgetting Sarah Marshall when I was in high school, I was like, okay, he wrote this. He's the star of it. This movie's going to take off, which it did. And he's going to get so many more offers, which to be fair, he did movies after that, but he kind of stepped away for a little bit and started writing books in the past few years. So maybe working on End of the Tour might have sparked that creative flow in him to do that, but I'm glad that he's making a return. And I'm kind of with you, man. I'm like, ever since, the whole story with Casey Affleck broke, I figured, okay, people are not going to put him in movies anymore. Nope, he's still in movies. So whatever. But I'm more excited for Dakota and Jason. And oddly enough, just kind of picturing them right now talking with one another, I actually think that's probably genius casting. And if I had to make a guess, I would think that if the friend is kind of going the way I think it is, I think this is going to be like a triangle situation. And I think Segel and Johnson are probably going to be like a couple in this movie. If I had to make a guess, I don't know. I'm just hearing them talking in a scene together, and I think it's actually like really great personalities together. So yeah, all around pretty great casting news.
All right, I think that my favorite is probably the Seth Rogen.
I agree. I was
the
blown away.
The material is really interesting. I'm excited to see who they play.
Well, I was blown away by because listen, you guys know that Seth Rogen's my boy. I love him to death. I've been a huge fan of him ever since 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, and him writing Superbad was a huge inspiration for me. I know it's weird to say, but it is. The guy is a great actor, and there's two movies I always put or point towards people if they're ever curious on Seth Rogen's ability. If you want to see him do a more kind of like somber, dramatic role, watch Take This Waltz. He is absolutely great in that movie, and him with Michelle Williams, it's a wonderful pairing. And if you want to see him act with density, with dialogue, watch Steve Jobs. The guy is able to spit out Aaron Sorkin dialogue and make it seem natural. And this is Seth Rogen, the guy that openly smokes weed and writes scripts, and makes a bunch of penis jokes. This guy can act, and I always tell people, don't let the pot fool you. Don't let the the penis humor and the sex humor. Don't let that fool you. He's good at that too, for the most part. But he is also a really great dramatic actor, and I'm so glad that Sorkin decided to go with him again. So yeah, that's probably my favorite bit of news too.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I've said it for a long time. I don't know if I've ever said it on here, maybe, but comedic actors are the best dramatic actors.
That is true.
At least 95% of the time.
Right.
Yeah, there's obviously a couple of dramatic actors, strictly dramatic actors, who are amazing, like Daniel Day-Lewis. But still, Robin Williams in dramatic fashion is amazing. Jim Carrey in dramatic fashion is amazing. And
as we saw with Melissa McCarthy, who just got nominated for her dramatic role.
Yeah, excellent performance. And it's because they're able to inhabit characters. They're not They're not just fooling around. And it's pretty great. So, and you are so right about Take This Waltz. By the way, it's a terrific movie. He's great in it. It has a lot of people pay attention to Michelle Williams for good reason, because she's amazing in that. And also Luke Kirby's really good. He plays the other one involved kind of in that situation. He's really good, and he's primarily a dramatic actor. But yeah, Rogen's right there as kind of the schlub who ends up being a lot cleverer and a lot more a much more special character in that narrative than you might expect.
Right.
Particularly the last moment between him and Michelle Williams is
that moment at the very end that Joel's talking about. And it also, Take This Waltz, I kid you not, I've been alive on this earth for 30 years almost. It has one of my favorite shots in any film I've ever seen. And I don't know if Joel remembers it, but I'm going to go ahead and just do a light spoiler. It's at the point where Michelle Williams has left Seth Rogen in the marriage. She goes to live with her mistress, or whatever the guy equivalent to that is, and there's a shot where they're having sex on a chair, and they're doing it, and it's a complete 360 shot, and it's showing them have sex as time passes, and as this time passes, it starts to the lust starts to wear off a little bit, and the guilt starts to kind of wash over her, and it's one of the best shots I've ever seen in this type like love triangle type of story. It's brilliant stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. All right, guys, we're gonna move on to our shared review, and this is our only review. I'm not doing any extra stuff because we're gonna be talking about our favorite films of 2015 after this. But we are going to get into our shared review of Miss Bala. Now, this is a remake of a 2011 film released in the U.S. in 2012 of the same name, directed by Gerardo Naranjo. I was able to catch up with this in the last week. Chase was not, so we're going to be coming at this kind of with different perspectives a bit. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. The story of this remake is that we follow a makeup artist from Los Angeles named Gloria. She is played by Gina Rodriguez, and Gloria is about to help a friend of hers named Suzu compete in the Miss Baja California pageant. Now, of course, the title is a play on that because Bala is the Spanish word for bullet, and that kind of ends up being an omen for the rest of the story, because whenever she is kind of hobnobbing with major figures in the pageant and also DEA agents, terrorists hit the party and kill all the DEA agents and some of the pageantry members. She is taken hostage, sort of at first, not hostage. She's kidnapped by members of this gang headed up by Lino, a mob boss played by Ismael Cruz Cordova. And Lino basically makes her his errand girl. She is a drug runner and delivers drugs across the border between Mexico and America, delivering drugs to a gun runner in San Diego, played by Anthony Mackie. And meanwhile, she's trying to figure out a way to escape her situation, and also find her friend Suzu, who disappeared without a trace from the party. All right, so here's how this is going to go. I'm going to go ahead and review the movie. Usually I kind of hand it over to Chase. I'm going to let him go second this time. It's a bit different because of just kind of the natural how this review was going to go. I just needed to go ahead and start with this because I have seen the original film, and there's something going on with the sort of intentions of this remake that I wanted to get to before I had Chase take it on from a colder perspective of having not seen the original.
Either way, I want you guys to be prepared. He's going to nail me to the wall because, like I said, I have very lukewarm feelings about the movie, and Joel's going to come at it from a swinging bat to my face. So I'm just saying, just get ready for it.
Well, what's interesting though is that my feelings are also kind of lukewarm, just for different reasons. Just because of how this movie's relationship to the original movie,
right?
Which is that almost, except for the setup, well, I should say, except for the general setup, because there's a lot of specifics changed about the characters. This movie is very different from the original movie. And in fact, it kind of starts, our friend Mark Dusick pointed this out in his review. The credit on screen is based on the Spanish language film. They never call it Miss Bala. They never pinpoint the screenwriters or the director or anything. They just say based on the Spanish language film and then leave it at that. And it kind of is mirrored by the rest of the movie, where, okay. No. I'm saying the original movie's director.
Oh, right. Okay.
All they say is in the credit whenever they're saying that the movie is based on something, because it is based on something.
Right.
All they say is based on the Spanish language film. They don't.
Yeah, my apologies. I thought you were talking about the remake.
The actual director credit.
Right,
No. This is indeed Catherine Hardwicke of Twilight and Red Riding Hood. Okay, so yeah, it starts right there, and I just want to say first that generally speaking, even when it comes to remakes, my philosophy is that comparisons are kind of inherently unfair unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstance within the storytelling where they're really trying to tell the same exact story as the original. Then what they're doing is they are inviting direct comparison. And in that case, I feel like it's fair. So sometimes it's kind of dumb to compare the two. For instance, I don't think that there's really any reason to compare Marion C. Cooper's original King Kong to Peter Jackson's King Kong, just because there's so many differences in how it approaches its spectacle, which was very subdued in the original movie, and it's obviously all there in the remake. But this is not that case. This is the case of a movie trying to tell the same story as the original movie, but also trying to make some changes to the characters, to the thematic attitude, and to just small details that ultimately kind of grow to undermine the reason for telling the story. And so, all right, I also have to say that I'm going to be sounding a bit kind of maybe politically backward in this review because of the nature of the original movie, which would not have been made how it is today, I don't think. I think that, in fact, this movie is kind of an answer to some stuff that is, again, inherent to the original movie and what it's trying to say about humanity, with some really blunt, like, nihilism and cruel irony that this movie completely ignores. So, I'm going to be talking pretty extensively about the original film and also ruining it for some people. But I'm going to still say, if you want to see a movie called Miss Bala, see the 2011 film, not this one. Now, having said all of that, this remake is not as bad as an early February kind of throwaway release might suggest, but it's still not very good. It mostly gets by on the charms and the ability of Gina Rodriguez, who is good here. As Gloria, she's able to kind of sell the whole, the strong character kind of thing that is, somebody's got to make it through this particular thing or at least try, kind of by the skin of her teeth. She's good in the role. It's a good performance. It's in a movie that doesn't really deserve her, but and elsewhere, I think that the movie's sense of action choreography is solid when it gets there, although it makes it way too much about the action edits than the original movie did, particularly in one shootout that is played all wrong, that I'll get to in a little bit compared to the original movie. Again, if you find that all of my comparisons to the original movie are unfair, I totally understand that. That's usually my take, but there are simply too many things about this remake that's trying to do what the old one did, but through a more, I guess, kind of woke lens, that I think undermine the story that it's actively trying to weave. And so, getting into this, again, I think Rodriguez is quite good. I don't really think anybody else here is really worth talking about, although I think Anthony Mackie has a really strong, like, brief appearance as that gun runner, and kind of a mysterious figure. But really, it's Rodriguez's show, and she reciprocates pretty well. I thought that Cordova, who plays the kind of this crime boss that she gets involved with, he was okay. I felt like he was a bit wooden to me, particularly in comparison to the actor who played the role in the original. I forgot his name. But even as good as Rodriguez was, she was not nearly as good as Stephanie Sigmund, who played the role in the original film. But again, there's a bit of a difference of approaching the character. So now I'm going to be getting into the original movie quite a bit. There's really not much to say about the new one, so honestly, it's in how the movie tries to tell this story that it's telling that I think is a major problem. And it starts with, for me, the fact that the original film is incredibly nihilistic. The character of Laura, who is turned into the character of Gloria here, the original protagonist, has absolutely no agency as a character. There are attempts on her part to escape the clutches of this gang, and all of them end up working horribly. She ends up being recaptured, threatened with death, all of that. She ends up being much, much, much less smart than I think the remake wants this character to be. And so the entire point of the original movie is that this woman, who in the original film is actually an active participant in the pageant, whereas here she's simply a makeup artist who's trying to help out with it and doesn't have any intention of taking part in it. She's exactly just a human. She's in no way more intelligent than she absolutely must be about, the things that she does. That's not to say that she's not intelligent. I'm not trying to say that. I think that she's perfectly believably intelligent. But with that comes the realization that she's less intelligent than these very intelligent killers and criminals who take her into their kind of inner circle, force her to do things, and in one case sexually assault her to make her kind of realize her place in their ranks, which is absolutely meaningless servitude and nothing more. That's the point of the movie, that it was this cruel, nihilistic, brutal world that has no meaning, much in the same way that Sicario was making those points about kind of the drug scene in Mexico. And just as effectively, I thought, too. It's a very good movie, the original film is. It has a distinctive sense of patience. There is no quick camera movement. The camera very patiently follows behind Laura's head a lot, particularly in, I guess, scenes that you could call action scenes. Really, they're just scenes with gunfire that, again, we're literally just following behind the character's head, and all of that other stuff is happening at the edges or just off frame. And so the original movie was not about action. It was not about some superhuman feats. It was about the complete mercilessness of this existence that she finds herself in. And all right, so I'm getting into some spoiler territory for the original film, and kind of sort of this one, so just kind of beware, I suppose. In the original film, the character of Suzu, who is the friend, does not survive. In fact, they are not reunited, and we learn about that character's death off screen. That was kind of the whole goal of Laura's kind of trying to look for her in the immediate aftermath of this attack. So then there's the absolute gigantic elephant in the room, which is the very, very final scene of both movies, or the final pair of scenes of both movies. And I'm going to try not to give anything direct away about what the new movie does with respect to my audience. But I will just say that in the original film, the justice system kind of has its way with this group of gang members. And in fact, among the people arrested and sent to jail for many, many years is the protagonist, because of the fact that she has been involved, whether or not it's been on, like intentional or by the fact that they forced her into the situation. She is arrested alongside everybody else and serves her time. And that's how the original movie ends. It ends with a cruel irony about how the justice system treats even sometimes victims of this, if they are forced into the position of acting on behalf of criminal organizations. And I will just say that everything about the remake's ending reverses pretty much everything that was so bold and brutal and cruel about the originals. And I think that it's because of that they constantly, in this climax, undermine the point that they're trying to make in the story, which is how cruel and brutal this world is. Because here, it kind of, without giving anything away, it kind of turns Gloria into a superhero of sorts, with a slow motion shot of her walking with a gun, which is something that the original character never holds in the original movie. They shift the action of the finale from, in the original movie, this sort of shabby apartment to a big, lavish kind of mini mansion, just so that they can have an elaborate shootout against the backdrop of a lot of pretty production design. And I think that it's that attitude that kind of undermines the whole thing. And so for me, it isn't a terrible movie. I think that it's generally well paced. There's, a couple of certainly very intense sequences that work really well. But I think that there's sort of an unintentional cruelty in this new movie's version of this story that it doesn't really reconcile with, because it's trying to be a little bit more hopeful in its ending. And it's also obviously trying to kind of establish a potential sequel. I think that there's an absolute, kind of factor of that here going on. And I think that felt false. But, again, Rodriguez works. Some of the action scenes do work. They're well handled. But I will say that one scene I have a huge problem with. There is a scene where she's going to be trying to get back into the custody of some DEA agents, one of whom is played by Matt Lauria, who, kind of swear to protect her and have told her a specific point at a meeting place that she can go to where she's going to be taken into custody and taken into their protection. And it turns into this big shootout where we see everything that happens, and rocket launchers are brought out and everything. In the original film, she is a helpless victim of that scene because she is taken back into the gang's care, so to speak, with quotes around it, against her will, as every single one of the agents on the side of the DEA are mercilessly killed. And it's the third instance where supposedly good people try to intervene on her behalf, and all of them are killed by the gang. The gang in the original movie is this unstoppable force before the ending, at least. And here, though, it becomes a case of, weirdly enough, Gloria making some random moral decision at the end of this scene and getting back into the good graces, so to speak, of the gang. And it played so false and absolutely baffling. I was putting my hand to my head. I was just like, wait, what just happened? So anyway, that's kind of the movie in a microcosm. It's this weird like confusion about its message. Is it trying to get her out of this situation, or is it trying to say that she's tough enough that she can be calculating enough to weave her way in and out of this situation? And then by the last scene, it kind of reverses itself in a certain way. And it's a very confused movie about its message, I think. So I'm giving it a C. It's not nearly the disaster that I thought it would be, considering the reputation of the original. Of course, I hadn't seen the original at the time this trailer dropped, so I didn't know exactly what the original was like. But having watched the original, having watched this version, I think that they're trying to achieve the same end through cosmetic changes in the remake that are that undermine everything that it's trying to say. So I'm giving it a C. It's not awful. I have no interest in watching it again. But then again, I would have no interest in watching the original again, and I'd give that one an A-. It's because it's a very bleak movie that is a tough watch. But this is sort of sanitized. It's very PG-13. There's none of the graphic violence of the original movie. I think that's a problem. But in its current form, it's vaguely passable. I think that you could do worse. But if you want to watch a movie called Miss Bala, watch the 2011 film. Particularly if you want to see this story told in a way that makes the point it's trying to make through the methods of kind of brutality that are important to bring across those points. So anyway, it's a C for me. Chase, I don't know what you gave this. I didn't watch your review. Sometimes I'll because we did this thing for a while where we didn't tell each other, but we decided in the new year that was kind of dumb to kind of, because we're both on Twitter and we follow each other, it's kind of dumb to expect that we can do that. So I didn't actually watch any of your review. I don't know what you think about this as a person who had not seen the original. So any comments on how the on the differences I kind of laid out, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, with the whole like shootout thing, I can address that towards the end as to what was going through my mind. But believe it or not, we're on the same page. It is a very whatever, very just fine movie. I mean, it's definitely not the worst thing I've seen. Definitely not anything good. But I will say, given it is the director of the first Twilight, it is probably the best thing she has done so far. So good on her. There are two things I like about this movie, and believe it or not, Joel actually pinpointed both of them. So we actually have, probably a good 99% thought process in this in terms of the remake, but he's bringing the comparisons. I can't do that. So the two things I really liked about this movie the most are Gina Rodriguez and the thriller aspect of the editing. So to get into Gina Rodriguez first, yeah, she completely sells this movie. The script isn't really much, but she makes it better than what it actually is. And I'll guarantee you, if you would have had any other actress in this role, this movie would have not worked, and it would have been even worse on the grade scale. But I do appreciate the fact that, the movie sets herself up as like this normal, average, woman, and then she is shook and frightened in the beginning, and then, she slowly transitions into this very like cunning person who's very confident and will do anything to survive. She's definitely in survival mode for 90% of the movie, and it's actually quite entertaining to watch. But there's a lot of facial acting that she brings to the role in terms of fear, sadness, wittiness. Like there's a lot to her role than just speaking lines, and I do appreciate the fact that she brought it to that kind of like extra bar. She didn't have to, so she definitely raised the bar in terms of her performance. So I do like her in the movie quite a bit. And the other thing I liked was the fact this movie was never boring. This movie is a crime drama thriller, and I can tell you that they succeeded in the thriller part. Another thing I can appreciate is not wasting any time with any type of filler that's unnecessary. We set the movie up with her job. She goes to see her friend. They go to a party. And then when it hits the fan, it's literally nonstop from that point on till the very end. So at the very least, in terms of constructing, decent suspense, decent action, and a slightly interesting story, I thought in terms of the thriller aspect of this movie, the editing was not bad, and it was never boring. It had a nice energy to it from that point on. So I can't really rail it against that. Those are my two positives with this movie. Everything else falters. To start with the overall story, characters, and the crime drama aspect, I thought all those were either weak or just fine. The overall story, to me, I felt like there was a lot going on, and they didn't really know what to focus on the most, and so it seemed kind of jumbled in terms of plot lines and certain characters that would kind of pop in and out with the movie, and it just, I don't know, there really never seemed to be a focus or an attention to detail on characters besides Gina Rodriguez. And I get that she is the lead, and this is the character we want to follow with her survival and her redemption and all that. I get that. But if you're going to have like this supportive cast of characters around her, you have to bring the emotional weight to it. You have to bring something more than just subpar acting and subpar written characters. It's not going to float well, and it just seems like a very average movie. Case in point, there's a scene where the bad guy that she is being housed by takes her to this barbecue place, and they sit down and have a talk about his past. That's about it. And, the movie wants us to kind of empathize with him a little bit and kind of understand his process, but it just comes across as like an interference in the movie that we didn't need. And
yeah, I was baffled by that scene.
Yeah, I was like, what is this?
Particularly having watched the original, and again, I keep going back to that, but they're trying to again make the same points about him,
right?
But through telling his past, and it just comes across as extraneous.
Yeah,
especially because he's a cipher in the original movie. We don't know anything about him, and we don't really want to because he's a creep. And he's a creep here, but suddenly we have to know about him for some reason. I was totally baffled.
So like they make wrong decisions like that in terms of focusing on his backstory, but like maybe not other characters. Like there was also a kill that happened in the movie that bugged the crap out of me, and it was another woman that was under the same hostage situation as she was, and so she has like a little, back and forth with Gina Rodriguez, and then she ultimately dies within like a scene. And I'm like, why didn't we give some meaty backstory to her and we gave it to the villain instead? And so once again, not focused. And to go to Joel's point, what also irritated me, I never saw the original, but I'm very well aware when I did my research, it's rated R. If this movie was pushed to the limits, there would have been more emotional baggage to these characters. When that lady got shot on the porch or whatever, in the backyard, I didn't feel anything because it was covered up. It didn't really show anything, so it just
it was a long shot with her like behind someone,
right?
Whenever the bullet hits her and she falls, we don't even see it.
Yeah, it takes away the punch of it, and that's also another thing I did not like about this movie. You water down, you neuter it, and it just. Like 13-year-olds not going to be interested in this movie. I'm sorry. You can make R-rated movies about the cartel and the kind of violent crimes that go on between Mexico and America. Look at Sicario. That was a great crime drama thriller about the cartel, and it was rated R. And every single moment of that movie was never wasted. It had the impact that you wanted. And this movie, I'm not saying like they're correlated, but this movie is like just kind of passing by and not really putting forth any effort. And so once again, to go back to the characters either being underwritten or just not really focused in the right direction in terms of what you want as a supporting cast. But I will give credit where credit is due. Gina Rodriguez is probably the only good actor in this. Everyone else, like I said, is either passable or just, like Joel mentioned, very, very wooden. And I guess the last thing I'll comment on is before I get to the whole shootout thing, visually it was kind of bland. I know that when you are working with Mexico and these kind of like rich desert colors, kind of popping through with like the city life and stuff, you figure there would be a little bit more care into the visuals. Once again, like a Sicario, where you have someone at the helm that understands color and framing and making shots look interesting and compelling. This does none of that. Yes, does it edit some of the action sequences and the overall rhythm to the movie very well? For sure, but I wish they would have put a little bit more effort into the visual styling into the movie. So overall, I'm with Joel on this one. This is our first one where we agree on the grade. C, down the middle, average, fine, whatever. I don't want to watch again. Okay, so going back to the shootout. Before I give my reasoning, so Joel, just remind me again why you had a problem with her going back to the cartel people.
Well, it's because it frames it as a moral choice for her. In the original movie, she's literally being led, and so like led through all of this stuff that's happening by somebody. There's no meat point. There's no American DEA agents. It's the Mexican police, but it's they're vaguely developed as mild allies. We never really meet them. There's no character here that's an American DEA agent, but so there's no meat point. There's nothing like that. She's being led through something where the Mexican police try to intervene, or maybe it's the DEA. And honestly, it's not clear. And the point of the scene is that it's not clear because she doesn't know what's going on. outside of her kind of field of vision. And so the problem is that it frames it as kind of this moral decision on her part at a specific moment in the development of that scene where, I mean, we won't give away what happens, but she's kind of forced back into their again, I use the word care with quotations around it, but into their custody almost. That it doesn't seem like it just seems like it's very confused about what it's trying to say about that situation, given her decision, which
I was okay with it, and I'll tell you why. Of course, the whole the DEA part with those two guys, once again, not enough focus on them, and it's just like they were in the movie, they were out.
Ends up being completely extraneous.
It's a waste of time, and so
Yeah.
They told her in the movie, meet us at this door and we'll unlock it. And at that point, when they're in the middle of the shootout and the door is locked, she, calls him up over and be like, excuse me, the door is not locked. And he's like, oh, sorry, I can't help you. And so at that point, I knew that, they were bought by the cartel to some degree, so they don't really care. And so at that point, she had to make that decision to go back with the, the person, like what you said, quote unquote, with care, because if you give away
it's the whole thing where she goes back for the villain. She's dragging him across like it's some heroic act.
But you have to do that. You have to do that. If you're in that situation and you are a mole, you have to appear like you are not a mole. And so if he's already suspicious that you're by that door trying to get out, you have to kind of rectify that and go to him and save him as if you were just a part of the shootout and you had no idea what was going on.
Yeah,
you have to do that.
I think it's a gaping problem with even the introduction of that whole subplot with the DEA.
Right. And hey, listen,
in the original movie, she's basically just kind of dragged through this. Random members of the gang are killed in front of her. And I know that I'm kind of arguing in favor of the simpler version of this story where she's a victim, but the point of the whole arrangement is that it's a cruel and brutal and merciless and reasonless world. If that's a word, I'm going to make it one for this particular conversation. She has no control over any of her actions in that. And here she's making moral choices in a split second, as if suddenly she's supernaturally intelligent and would know that this is going to happen. I just feel like there's an kind of an imbalanced sense of character intelligence where the original film was making the point that no, this is just a regular person shoved into a situation in which they have no control and a bunch of stuff happens to them. And the reason is because
I'm not
there's no reason.
disagreeing with your point of view. I think that's an interesting way to look at it. I'm just, because you asked me like, what I thought, and I just took it as, is it a lazy way to introduce her getting smarter in the situation? Sure, because if you were in that situation, it would be very hard for you to decide that as your choice rather than try to run away or something. And so I get what you're saying. I just took it as, she has to like be smart in front of this dude, and maybe she's getting smarter when she got freaked out by the DEA people, and she's like, okay, I know how to play this game now. I gotta be the mole. Do all this. I'm not saying like it's the like, oh God, what a great scene. I was just like, okay, I understand what they were going for. Let's just keep moving type of deal.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, we both gave it a C.
Joel, I'm actually surprised that that movie prompted more discussion than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a curious one. All right, guys. So we're going to move into our special segment at the beginning of every month, at least for the next few months. We're going to be talking about our favorite films of specific years in the past, kind of leading up to this whole idea that we're coming upon the end of the decade. We might as well highlight some of our favorites of previous years, and I'm going to be offering we're going to be offering our favorite films of 2015. Now, Similarly to last time, I'm going to lead into it with my 10 through 6 selections very quickly and then get into more depth about my top 5, because the point is to just kind of highlight the 5 favorites. If we're going to be doing the top tier, our favorite movies of the 2010s, then we might as well talk about some of these. So 2015 was a really good year. Of course, the Best Picture winner was Spotlight. And the Best Director winner was Alejandro González Iñárritu for The Revenant. Now,
It's also
interestingly,
the year that you and I started dating. We met each other for the first time.
Yes,
we went on our first date.
Exactly. The end of the tour was that movie. Yes, I love you. All right, so so getting into kind of my top 5, I'm going to lead into it with very quickly what my 10 through 6 are, just to give an idea to listeners out there what doesn't quite make the top tier, the movies that I truly love that year. And they're going to surprise some people, because at number 10, a movie that we've been mentioning here quite a bit in Miss Bala is Sicario. Big fan of that. Very kind of morally nihilistic, very dark film that I thought was much better than its sequel ended up being. Number 9 was Mad Max Fury Road, the most insane action movie of that whole year. Complete, like, bonkers gonzo piece of entertainment. I really liked it. It's not my number 1, though, which seems to be everybody else's. Number 8 was The Revenant. I'm sure that Chase will talk about that one in a little bit. Number 7 was Youth from director Paulo Sorrentino, featuring its great performances from Michael Caine, Harvey Keitel, Rachel Weisz, Paul Dano, Jane Fonda in a great little role. Love that movie. It's very underrated. It's a big, brash study of aging and regret, and loved it. And the one that just barely misses my top 5, people are probably going to call for my death because of this, but it's Inside Out from Pixar, which is a truly special movie. And it announces that in the opening scene, where it literally starts with birth and moves through the different emotions as characters in the narrative that we all kind of have as kids. And then it uses that to gradually kind of start a study of growing depression in a young person. And that's something that people don't really realize. Whenever you have joy and sadness lost inside your head, that's kind of what that is. It's pretty great. So all great movies, not quite my top 5, although they could be a top 5. My number 5 was Tangerine from director Sean Baker, who, one of his movies made my top 10 list of 2017, and that was The Florida Project. I haven't seen his first 2 films, which were before Tangerine. There was one of them, I can't remember the name of it, but the other one was called Starlet. I haven't seen either of those, but Tangerine is truly just a great time. It's what I like to call a transgender bunny comedy. These 2 sex workers on the streets of Santa Monica Boulevard, who one of them finds out that her boyfriend cheated on her while she was in prison, and she has just gotten out, and the news is broke, so she's going to go try to find him and kind of confront him about that. And it's got 2 great performances from Kiki Rodriguez and Maya Taylor. I don't think that either of them have really worked in a movie since then. They should, but it's also got that sort of feeling that I had from Florida Project of this tapestry of reality, where Baker has cast, non-actors against adult film actors, against, in a couple of cases, professional actors. James Ransone from one of the Sinister films, I think both of the Sinister films, is in this as the boyfriend, the one who cheated. And it's just this amazing tapestry of kind of this, very complicated vision of the streets of Santa Monica. And it's fascinating. It's really wonderful. It was the movie, kind of the first movie to start this trend of being shot on an iPhone. The first really popular movie to be shot on an iPhone. At that point, I think it was an iPhone 5 Plus, and it was like pimped out with a little kind of an app that allowed Baker to shoot the action and handle it. He had a couple of devices that let him handle it like a camera, sort of. And yeah, really just a fun time. Really funny, really touching at times. Got some of the shots of the year of 2015 for me, and I loved it. Just a great piece of work. I was able to catch it when it came to Netflix, I believe. It's out on DVD, kind of hard to find that, but I think it's still on Netflix. So definitely check that one out, especially if you love the Florida Project, because it's very similarly kind of this really just pure kind of the vision of a young auteur in the making, I think, and it's fantastic. So that's my number 5. My number 4 is About Ellie from director Asghar Farhadi, and this one is really it's kind of okay. So Farhadi does this thing where he takes these plots that might belong to a thriller and then runs them through the kind of the perspective of just a general like character-based drama. So to give you an idea of what I mean, these couples have all gathered alongside a single friend on this beachfront resort for a weekend of fun and a getaway. There's a couple of small children present. Otherwise, they've left their children with care workers and all of that. One of the young children is with the single friend, Ellie, of the title. When they go out into the ocean, suddenly Ellie vanishes without a trace, and the kid is put into direct danger of being of drowning in the sea as she kind of goes out farther from the shore. The parents run out and save her, and suddenly the question becomes, where did Ellie go? Why? Did she intentionally leave this child here? Did something happen that she had to leave immediately without, looking out for the child's well-being? And above all, who is Ellie? Because none of them know her last name. None of them really know, really who she is, and none of them know about Ellie. And yes, I made that pun because that's what this film is ultimately about. The lies that we tell each other about ourselves, the lies that we tell ourselves about each other, the lies that the things that we conceal from other people for petty reasons. And here it all comes to a head when policemen are brought to the place, and there's a cell phone that was in one place, and when they find it, it's in another place. How did it get to that other place? And why was it in the first place to begin with? That's absolutely paramount to the story. It is a fascinating study. Farhadi is a filmmaker that I've grown to really like. I've only seen 3 of his films. He's made a couple of other ones. He's got one coming out very soon, this month, in fact, with Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz that I'm looking forward to. And we'll be talking about him again, trust me, when we get to 2011, because he made a movie back then. This was an interesting case, though, because About Ellie came out in the U.S. in 2015, but it was actually made and released in its home country back in 2009, and it was eligible for the Oscars of 2010. I think that it was nominated. Pretty sure it was back then, but it didn't come to our screens until 5 years after that. And so, yes, I'm saying that it's one of the best films of 2015. It's truly mesmerizing. Similarly, there's another movie that's more directly a thriller, and that is at my number 3 spot, which is Phoenix from director Christian Petzold. This one stars Nina Hoss as a woman named Nellie, who has survived the concentration camps of the Nazis and been shot in the face in the process, although it was just a bullet graze, and she's had to have some facial reconstruction. So the problem is that her husband seems to be the one who might have betrayed her to the Nazis. The fact of her facial reconstruction is so paramount to her journey to find this husband that she no longer looks like her former self, which means that she can come upon him and he will never know that it's her. And so what she does is sort of this Hitchcockian situation where she goes to look for him and then poses as another woman and slowly falls back in love with him until, of course, she remembers what he did. And it all comes together in this ending that is absolutely shattering. The best ending of any movie in 2015, involving a song that she sings, because her job when she was before the concentration camps was a singer, and he was a piano player, and so it all comes together with this bit of dramatic irony that suddenly closes in, and it's absolutely fascinating. It's very much in kind of that very patient drama way that a thriller like Hitchcock's Vertigo is. It doesn't ever kind of raise its voice, if you will. It doesn't really come and do this big thriller kind of with a lot of characters. It's not a loud thriller, basically. It's a very, very quiet suspense piece, and it's stunning. And I just love this film. It's on Criterion. It was one of their acquisitions from that year, and it's great. And in fact, there's another film at my number 2 that was also picked up by Criterion that came out in 2015, and it's at my number 2. It is Andrew Haig's 45 Years. This one stars Charlotte Rampling and Tom Courtenay as a couple entering their 45th year of marriage. And suddenly, the girlfriend that Courtney's character had years and years ago, who disappeared in an accident atop a mountain, her body is found. And so the film is about Rampling's character dealing with the fact that her husband, whom she has loved for many, many years and never told her about this, suddenly has to deal with feelings for a person from a long time ago who she discovers was his kind of idea of a great love. She thought that it was her, and he was still dealing with the loss of this other woman. And so it's not a thriller. It's a very quiet drama, but it's stunning and emotional. And the performances from Rampling and Courtney are absolutely magnificent. I think that Rampling was my Best Actress winner, and Courtney was certainly up there for Best Actor. And it's amazing. So love that film, love all those movies. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again here. Everybody probably knows by now what my number 1 is of 2015. It's a movie that came upon the back end of a series that everybody thought was dead after the 4th movie, or 5th, whatever number movie, 6th movie, I guess, attempted to bring it back and didn't really do a particularly popular job of it. And that would be Creed, the spin-off of the Rocky series that follows the son of Apollo Creed, once rival, then turned best friend of Rocky Balboa. The son is played by Michael B. Jordan and, of course, Sylvester Stallone, who wrote, I think, the movie, and Ryan Coogler, who directed it, do this really fascinating job of bringing Rocky Balboa back into the picture. And I think that the whole reason, it's not just because this is a great continuation of a story, although it is. That's not the reason why it's my number 1. The reason why it's my number 1 is 2 other reasons. One is because this is a movie primarily about the effects of kind of legacy upon a person who is still kind of reckoning with his fathers and trying to make a name for himself in the boxing world, but cannot, just simply because of the matters surrounding the original, the first person's death. The fact that he kind of goes back to Philadelphia to learn from Rocky, the kind of be trained in the ways of boxing through these great sequences of long take fights and great choreography and cinematography from Maurice Alberti. That's why this movie is my number one of 2015. Just nothing has ever quite spoken to me quite like that movie, and it's also very much about Black identity. In a year that it was kind of coming back into the zeitgeist being talked about. It's always been on everybody's lips, of course. I don't want to say that it hasn't, but conversations had been restarted about the idea of Black identity, and this movie speaks to that in a great way. And it helps that it's from a director like Coogler, who later brought this into Black Panther, and before that had made Fruitvale Station with Jordan, and certainly touched upon it there. And it's got such a specificity about it that I think that kind of works with the broad elements of it being this rousing entertainment where there's a big fight at the end and all of that. But it's about much, much more than that. And I think that's why, for me, every bit of this movie just spoke to me so well, and that's why it's my number one. Even though, even above, art house movies, it was the best bit of big screen entertainment. It was the best bit of nostalgia-driven kind of rebooting, if you will, that came out that year. And yes, that includes stuff like Mad Max and Star Wars. It was better than all of that, and it was the best film, I think, in the Rocky franchise ever, even better than the first Rocky, and should absolutely have been an Oscar thing. But that's my number one. So to kind of briefly recap: number 5, Tangerine; number 4, About Ellie; number 3, Phoenix; number 2, 45 Years; and number 1, Creed. A lot of short titles, weirdly enough. But yeah, that's my top 5. So, Chase, any thoughts about ones you might have seen? Any ones you want to see from these? And then get into your brief recap of yours.
I still need to see Phoenix, Tangerine, and Youth. So there are several on your and About Ellie. So definitely most of your list I have not seen. But that's okay. I remember when Joel and I first got together and we started talking about our favorite movies from previous years, and he told me Creed was, his number one of 2015. That it still shocks me to this day, given the fact that we had the triumphant return of his favorite franchise that year. It still blows my mind, but you know what? That's the power of movies. So just to recap real quick, if you are new to the show, this will be completely new to you, but if you've been listening for some time, you have heard me do a top 10 episode on 2015, and so this will be kind of a brief recap for everyone out there. So 10 through 6, just really quick. I have The Hunting Ground at 10, a very haunting documentary about sexual assault and rape on college campuses. Number 9 was one of my favorite films I saw at Fantastic Fest, which was Son of Saul, the very claustrophobic World War II movie, primarily the Holocaust, where it was focused on. A very, very emotional movie. I absolutely loved it. And then people will be shocked when I have this right above it at number 8, but it's Cooties. One of my favorite horror comedies this decade. I had so much fun with it. And just to give you guys a little fun fact, because Joel always loves it when I get to horror myself out, this is the only accomplishment I have in my career so far in terms of actually making it on quotes or whatever. If you go to your local store, and I don't know how it is for all of our people that aren't in the U.S. that listen to this show, because I know we have some listeners in New Zealand and Canada. If you go and see if you can find the Cooties Blu-ray or DVD, that top quote is by yours truly. My name is on there and everything. That is me. I can verify that. So, yeah, very, very fun horror comedy. And I'm just really angry at myself that I did not come up with that idea, because it's genius. Okay, so number 7 is The Hateful Eight. Very good Quentin Tarantino film. Most of his films make my top 10 every year they come out, and I'm assuming it will be the same this year, unless Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is just absolute trash. So, all right, and then my number 6 before I get into my top 5 is Sicario. Very, very good crime thriller drama. So there you go, Ms. Bala. Take some notes. Okay, my number 5 is Steve Jobs. I'm a huge fan of Danny Boyle when he's a director, and I'm a huge fan of Aaron Sorkin when he writes. And I just thought every performance was magnetic. The dialogue is rich, it's meaty, and you just kind of soak this all in. Like watching a play on stage. It's just really intriguing stuff, especially when it's like mostly dialogue. And Michael Fassbender, Seth Rogen, Kate Winslet, all fantastic performances. And once again, just proves to people why Seth Rogen can act. My number 4 is actually the first time Joel and I ever met. That would be End of the Tour with Jesse Eisenberg and Jason Segel. And Jason Segel playing David Foster Wallace, a real life author. And it was just a really touching story. And I really love the dynamic on screen. And I really do think that Jason Segel went to some dark places to play this character, given Foster Wallace's personality. My number 3 was my first time I was ever introduced to Jacob Tremblay, and it was my second film of Brie Larson's I've ever seen, and that would be Room. Not The Room, even though I have a very, very soft spot for that movie. This one is Room, and this one tells the story of Jacob Tremblay and Brie Larson, a mother and son who are trapped, and we don't know why or who, where they're even at. They're just trapped in this very like basement-y type of area, or like like an outside cellar, and so we don't really know much except that we can look up through the sky roof and see that there are clouds outside, so they're somewhere. But they eventually escape, and then it just becomes a really kind of devastating drama about kind of recouping in society after that. And it's just it's the type of performances that just kind of blow my mind, that Jacob Tremblay was just that young and he was able to kind of rock the house with that movie. My number 2 is Inside Out. Easily top 3 Pixar film for me. Taking emotions as characters and having them have emotional arcs is like one of the most genius things I've ever seen in a kid's film. And I remember when I went to go see it, I was the only single person without any kids in the audience, so I'm sure people were about to call the cops on me. But from what I was noticing around the theater is that all these kids were kind of enjoying it. And, I was sitting there as 25 at the time, thinking to myself, this is a really smart movie to kind of introduce kids to psychology a little bit and how the brain functions and emotions that humans go through. I think it's not like something you show us for like 100% accuracy, but I think it's a nice like gateway tool to that. And of course, every time when I mention this, Joel sheds a tear a little bit for Bing Bong. One of the I know Bing Bong. No! When he drifted away, I was probably the most grown person in that audience, crying, and I was proud. So yeah, Inside Out number 2. My number 1, when I saw this movie, I walked out going, this movie is going to win Best Cinematography, Best Director, and Best Actor. And guess what? It swept in all 3 of those categories, and is my absolute favorite film of 2015, The Revenant. A very like haunting, beautiful at the same time type of survival film. It is shot with immaculate beauty. It is directed with such fierce, kind of bare bones mechanics. And then you have a tour de force performance, Leonardo DiCaprio. I am also one of these people that I wish he would have won for another role in his career, but I'm finally glad that he got the recognition he deserves, because he is one of the best in the business. And just to give you guys how good of an actor he is, the lady that Joel and I write for DallasMovieScreens.com, she does not like Leonardo DiCaprio at all. And guess what her number one film of 2015 was? The Revenant. So, that just shows you the power of that movie. It's just it's just incredible. It's very few films in this decade so far have made me walk out in awe. And this was one of them. Moonlight was one of them. It's just, it's when you walk out of those movies, that they're number one. I just remember and this was late in the game. I saw The Revenant in December, and it jumped up all the way up there because Inside Out was my number one for the longest time. And I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? It just took me on this really like haunting journey that I won't soon forget, and so that's why it's my number one.
Nice. Yeah, I love it too. There are a lot of people who don't. They think that it's kind of empty or whatever, but no, I love it. It has sort of roots. You need to see this movie considering you love The Revenant. It's Agira, The Wrath of God. It's from 1972, and it's Werner Herzog's movie, starring Klaus Kinski in one of their many contentious pairings. They were not nice and did not like each other, but and in fact, at one point in the production of another movie, I think Kinski. No, was it the other way around? One of them almost hired a hitman to kill the other one. Anyway, because they hated each other so much. And anyway, but it has roots in that because it's also about a trek down a river almost. And it's also equally kind of about the sort of the brutality of nature almost. It doesn't feature a person literally crawling, after a bear attack, but it's intense. And this is sort of in that vein of kind of very intense, very, but very beautiful. The cinematography is gorgeous. All the long takes really work for me. This is not a slag on Birdman. We'll get to that next month, but it's very much it's a little less showy in its use of one takes than Birdman was. Of course, that was part of the point of Birdman. This one, it's using that to kind of tell this story of life in the old kind of the old West, I guess, old Midwest almost. And I think it's a great piece of work. It's weirdly enough my second favorite DiCaprio performance behind The Wolf of Wall Street.
I totally agree. That's the one I actually thought he should have won for.
Yeah, that's his best work on screen, particularly because both of them are incredibly physical performances at one point.
The expired Quaalude scene alone is what people aspire to be in movies, like in terms of like how good of an actor you want to be. Like that scene alone is why Leo's the best.
It's a great piece of physical comedy on the level of like Chaplin or Keaton. It's amazing. Right. And this, he does a similar kind of very physical thing with his performance, and it's great. It's great. I definitely love that movie. I'm very pro Iñárritu on everything I've seen of his.
Same.
There's a couple of blind spots, but Babel I love. I love Birdman, and I love The Revenant. So those are the three. I haven't seen Amores Perros. I've heard that one's pretty great. I haven't seen Beautiful. I've heard that one's pretty great. So yeah, he's a great director for sure. And yeah, I had actually predicted that it would win Best Picture, and it didn't, but I think it was pretty close between that and Spotlight. And just in terms of placements, I think on that preferential ballot thing that they do, I think that they probably shared a lot of the same placements. Wouldn't be surprised. So, in any case, all right. So those are our favorite films of 2015. We'll be back with this idea, coming back to our favorite films of 2014 on the first episode in March. So, and I'm excited to get into that year because Chase knows what my number one is. I think he knows off the top of his head, and I can't wait to talk about it. So,
yep.
All right, folks, that is it for this episode. Our next episode is in 2 weeks. Again, Chase is going to be out of town next week, so we're taking a break. We're coming back and doubling up. I'm not going to be offering any extra reviews. We're going to both review The Lego Movie 2, the second part. I love that title. and also Alita Battle Angel, which brings me into Chase's vague little hint about what he thought of Alita. So give it to us, Chase.
I have been sitting here for 2.5 hours, and I was thinking to myself, how could I phrase Alita to where it's vague, slightly gives my thoughts on it, but also leaves you guys like with a little bit of an appetizer before we get into the next episode. So the way I'm going to phrase it is this. James Cameron doing, Avatar with those type of visuals. I want you to apply that to this movie. But I do think in some of the story compartments and even some of the characters, it has some of the issues that Mortal Engines suffered from. So that is what I'm going to leave you with. I'm not going to say whether I liked it or not, but I will be curious to see how Joel takes that, because I will say that when I left the movie, there was maybe the last 10 minutes of it that left a sour taste in my mouth, but that's all I'll say. All right, so that will be
What is Mortal Engines? I'm
oh, God, it's the movie that we tried that experiment on, and I kind of wish we didn't waste our breath with that.
Made $18 million or something on like $100 million.
It bombed pretty hard, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm very worried that Alita will bomb hard. Right. But it is what it is. That's the business. So so that will be 2 weeks from now. We will be reviewing the Lego Movie 2, the second part, and Alita Battle Angel. So 2 big heavy hitters, one from Warner Brothers and one from 20th Century Fox. So, Joel, where can the lovely people find you online?
Well, you can find my writing on joelonfilm.com. This week I reviewed Miss Bala, as well as They Shall Not Grow Old, that documentary that I talked about earlier, and caught up with a little drama called Here and Now on DVD. So you can read those reviews there. You can also find me on Twitter at RealJoelCopling, ReelJoelCopling, and on Letterboxd at jcopling. And you can find some of my writing at DallasMovieScreenings.com.
That is correct. And you can find my stuff there too. Doing a lot more this month for them. And then, of course, Twitter at RealChaseLee. The podcast Twitter page is Real Man Podcast. And, of course, for this actual show, whether you're listening on CastBox, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, wherever, Spotify even, please, like, favorite, spread it around, and let people know this is your favorite movie podcast to listen to. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the new mic, and, I just want to continue to grow for you guys in terms of quality. So that is that. This has been episode 265 of the Real Me and Cole in the Movie Podcast. That is Joel. I am Chase. See you guys in 2 weeks. It's going to be 2 big heavy hitters, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So peace out, everyone. See you guys in a couple weeks.
Bye.